Hi, glad you're back with me. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
I was standing at the back of the conference room when my little sister pinned on the rank I had earned in silence. The room smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne. Senior officers filled the first 3 rows. A few staff analysts stood along the walls pretending not to check their phones. I stayed near the exit. Habit. Cyber intelligence officers don't usually stand in the spotlight. We build the systems that keep other people alive. We don't get medals for it. Victoria Vicky Vance stood front and center under the projection screen. Her dress blues were tailored tighter than regulation preferred, but no one was going to correct her today. A silver oak leaf rested on her collar, catching the light every time she turned her head. Lieutenant Colonel, just like that. The announcer read her citation in a steady, proud voice. For exceptional leadership and strategic innovation in the development of Operation Northern Phantom's advanced cyber defense architecture. My jaw tightened. Operation Northern Phantom, that wasn't her project. That was mine. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just listened. Vicky stepped forward to the podium. She adjusted the microphone like she owned the building. She always had that confidence. The kind that sounds convincing even when it's empty. 6 months ago, she began. I identified critical vulnerabilities in our Northern Command cyber perimeter. 6 months ago, I was sleeping on a cot in my secure office, living off black coffee and protein bars, rewriting encryption layers at 3 in the morning. She clicked the remote. The first slide appeared on the screen, a network diagram, my network diagram. Same architecture, same segmentation logic, same layered intrusion detection nodes, placed exactly where I had put them after running live simulations against hostile intrusion patterns. She kept talking. I designed a multi-tier authentication model that integrates adaptive response triggers. You didn't design that, Vicky. I did. I recognize my phrasing, not word for word, but close enough. She had changed verbs, swapped constructed for designed, replaced redundant isolation protocol with multi-tier authentication model. Cosmetic edits, nothing structural. The structure was mine. The colonel standing beside me leaned over slightly. Impressive work, he said under his breath. I nodded once. Yes, sir. My pulse stayed steady. That's the advantage of working cyber. You learn to control your reaction. Panic is for people in the field. We deal with logic, evidence, patterns. Vicky advanced to the next slide. A heat map of simulated breach attempts. That heat map had taken me 3 weeks to calibrate. I had built the attack scenarios myself, using archived hostile signatures from real-world incidents. It wasn't theoretical, it was practical, field-tested logic. She smiled. This system reduces breach success probability by 78% in the first 30 seconds of intrusion. That statistic came from my final validation report. 78%, not 75, not 80, 78. She didn't even change the number. The general in the front row nodded with interest. Pens moved. Notes were taken. My hands stayed folded behind my back. I had submitted that final report through secure channels. It never went public. It never circulated outside cleared leadership. Access was logged, controlled, audited. And yet here it was on her slide deck. She paused for dramatic effect. I poured everything I had into this project, she said. It became personal. That part almost made me laugh. Because it was personal. For me. I remembered the night I finished the final encryption layer. My eyes burned from staring at code. My shoulders felt like concrete. I had run the last simulation at 2:14 a.m. When the system successfully repelled the staged attack without triggering collateral shutdown, I allowed myself exactly 30 seconds to breathe. Then I documented everything. Because documentation is how you survive in intelligence. You document, you timestamp, you archive, you protect yourself. Vicky kept talking about her team. She mentioned analysts who had never worked under her. She referenced coordination meetings she had never attended. She spoke with clean confidence. No hesitation, no fear. That was the first moment I understood this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. The applause started before she even stepped away from the podium. Officers stood. The general approached her personally to pin the medal. Outstanding initiative, he said. She lowered her eyes modestly. A performance I'd seen since we were children. I stayed where I was. I didn't clap. I didn't need to. I was busy replaying access logs in my head. My secure files were stored in a compartmentalized environment. Access required multi-factor authentication, physical token, password, biometric confirmation, which meant one of two things. Either someone with high-level clearance pulled it, or someone had physical access to my workspace. The general shook her hand. Cameras flashed. A few officers glanced toward me, not because they suspected anything, because they knew we were sisters. Same last name, same branch, same uniform, different reputations. She stepped down from the stage. Her eyes found mine instantly. She walked toward the back of the room like she had been waiting for this exact moment. We stood 2 feet apart. Up close, I could see the faint line of foundation along her jaw. Perfect hair, perfect smile. "You look surprised," she said softly. I held her gaze. "You presented my work." She tilted her head slightly. "Our work." There it was, the adjustment, the rewrite. "No," I said. "Mine." For half a second the smile faded. Then it returned sharper. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered as she walked past me. "You don't have what it takes to stand on that stage." She brushed my shoulder on the way by, like she had already won. I didn't turn around. I didn't chase her. I stayed exactly where I was, staring at the empty podium where my project had just been paraded under someone else's name. In the military, betrayal doesn't always come from the enemy. Sometimes it comes from the person who shares your last name. Have you ever built something with your own hands, only to watch someone else take credit while everyone applauded them? Tell me in the comments what you did. Did you stay silent, or did you make sure the truth had a way of speaking for itself? I kept my face neutral as she walked away, but the memory of how we got here started replaying whether I wanted it to or not. People think betrayal begins with one bad decision. It doesn't. It begins with patterns you ignore. I've been covering for Victoria since we were teenagers. She was the charming one, the confident one, the one who could walk into a room and make adults laugh. I was the quiet one who read manuals for fun and corrected instructors when they misquoted regulations. Guess which personality wins at family dinners? When I enlisted, I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I wanted structure, clear rules, a system where performance mattered more than personality. I was naive. At 19, I received a signing bonus for my cyber aptitude score. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than I'd ever held in my account. I planned to use it for certifications and advanced training materials. 3 weeks later, Victoria called me crying. Credit card debt, missed payments, a car on the verge of repossession. She was already in ROTC and said if the financial issue became public, it could jeopardize her standing. "I just need help getting stable," she said. "Once I commission, I'll pay you back." I wired the money the next morning. No contract, no repayment schedule, just trust. I told myself that's what older sisters do. That wasn't the only time. During her junior year in ROTC, she almost lost her scholarship. Not because she lacked intelligence, because she skipped mandatory training events to attend networking parties with visiting officers. Someone reported it. An academic review board was scheduled. I had just completed a competitive selection process for an advanced cyber warfare fellowship. Only a handful of slots existed nationwide. It would have fast-tracked my career by years. Victoria called again. "If I lose this scholarship, I'm done," she said. "Dad will never forgive me." Our father valued military prestige like other people value oxygen. Losing a scholarship would have branded her a disappointment. I contacted the fellowship coordinator and withdrew my acceptance. I cited family obligations. That opened a slot for another candidate. Then I spent 2 weeks helping Victoria prepare her appeal packet. I rewrote her personal statement. I organized her training logs. I coached her through the review interview. She kept her scholarship. I didn't get another chance at that fellowship. At the time, I didn't resent her. I told myself I was investing in family stability, that her success was our success. That phrase sounds noble until you realize our usually means hers. When she commissioned the family through a party, my father toasted her discipline and leadership potential. My mother cried happy tears. I stood near the grill flipping burgers in uniform because I had just driven in from a 12-hour shift. "She's going to make colonel one day," Dad said proudly. No one asked what I was working on. I didn't bring it up. Cyber intelligence isn't flashy. It's long hours in classified rooms with no windows. It's writing code that no one outside a secure facility will ever see. You don't get parades for patching vulnerabilities. Victoria, on the other hand, gravitated toward visible assignments, public-facing roles, liaison positions, anything that put her near decision-makers and cameras. She called it strategic positioning. I called it networking with rank. Over the years, whenever she hit a wall, I became the solution. She needed help understanding encryption basics, I tutored her. She had to brief on cyber threat trends, I sent her. Sanitized summaries of my research. She wanted to sound technical in meetings. I gave her language she could use without embarrassing herself. Every time she said thank you. Every time I believed it meant something. The first time my mother made it clear where I stood was during a Sunday evening phone call. I was working late reviewing intrusion detection logs when my phone buzzed. I stepped into the hallway to take it. Martha Vance, she announced instead of saying hello like she was introducing herself at a banquet. Hi, Mom. I saw the internal newsletter, she said. Victoria's unit is getting recognition. That's wonderful. It is, I replied. There was a pause. I heard you've been working on some big cyber project, she continued. Something strategic. Yes, ma'am. Well, she said, and I could hear the shift in her tone. I hope you're being careful. Careful with what? With your ambition. I leaned against the wall. I'm not sure I understand. Vicky is the face of this family in the military, she said plainly. She's charismatic, she's visible, she connects with people. You're more behind the scenes. I didn't respond. You're good at paperwork, she added. Analysis, that's important. But don't overshadow her, don't compete. I had never competed with her. I built systems, she built reputations. They don't even operate in the same lane, I said calmly. You'd be surprised how these things look from the outside, my mother replied. If you start getting attention for something classified, and it somehow reflects on her unit, it could create tension. Be considerate. As if my entire career hadn't been structured around consideration. Vicky represents this family, she continued. You support. That's your role. Don't make it harder for her. There it was, not advice, instruction. I could hear dishes clinking in the background like she was multitasking while rearranging my place in the hierarchy. I kept my voice even. My work doesn't undermine hers. It could, she insisted. If people start comparing. I almost laughed at that. No one was comparing us. They didn't even know what I did. But in her mind, there was only one spotlight allowed. Just don't let your desk job create friction, she finished. She's going places. Desk job? I monitored hostile cyber activity targeting national infrastructure. But sure, desk job. After we hung up, I went back into the secure room and stared at the lines of code on my screen. That was the first time something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. Recognition, my sacrifices weren't acts of generosity in her eyes. They were expectations. My help wasn't kindness, it was obligation. Victoria never forced me to give up opportunities. I volunteered. I stepped aside. I told myself I was being strategic. But every system eventually reveals its pattern. And the pattern was simple. When she needed elevation, I lowered myself. When she stumbled, I absorbed the fall. When she shined, I stood in the dark. Standing at the back of that conference room today, watching her accept a promotion built on my work, I finally saw the full structure. This didn't start with stolen files. It started with a family that decided I was the support beam, not the building. And support beams aren't supposed to ask for credit. They're just supposed to hold the weight. I replayed the access logs in my head as the memory of the injury surfaced with uncomfortable clarity. It happened 3 months before that ceremony. We were running a joint field exercise with a communications battalion. My role wasn't combat, but cyber officers still participate in physical readiness rotations. During a nighttime navigation drill, one of the transport vehicles misjudged a turn on uneven terrain. I wasn't driving. I was in the back seat reviewing scenario notes on a secured tablet when we jolted hard enough to throw me sideways. My head hit the interior frame. I didn't black out, but I knew immediately something wasn't right. The medic diagnosed a mild concussion, no skull fracture, no bleeding, but strict orders. Limited screen exposure, rest. No classified work for at least 10 days. 10 days might not sound dramatic. In my world, it's an eternity. Operation Northern Phantom was in its final build phase. I had been working inside a compartmentalized, secure information facility, SCIF set up in a converted space attached to my off-base housing, approved, inspected, locked down with proper hardware and layered authentication. It wasn't casual, it wasn't sloppy, it followed protocol, but I couldn't access it while under medical restriction. Victoria called the day she heard about the accident. I'm coming over, she said. You shouldn't be alone. I almost declined. Then I remembered every time she'd said she needed help, and I'd shown up without hesitation. Fine, I told her, just for a few days. She arrived with groceries and exaggerated concern. She hugged me carefully like she was auditioning for a caregiving commercial. You need to rest, she said. No screens, doctor's orders. She took my phone and set it face down on the counter, like she was confiscating contraband. For the first 2 days, she played the role perfectly. Cooked meals, answered the door, screened non-classified calls. She even joked about how boring my house was, without decorative personality. Everything looks tactical, she teased. That was intentional. On the 3rd day, she brought up work. Are you behind on anything, she asked casually. I can't access classified systems, I replied. It's frozen until I'm cleared. But your physical workspace is still here, right? She said. Yes, you trust me, don't you? That question should have set off alarms. Instead, I heard history, scholarships, debt payments, tutoring sessions. All the times I had proven loyalty. I do, I said. The SCIF required a physical access token in addition to biometric authentication. The token stayed secured in a locked drawer in my bedroom. I wasn't supposed to delegate access, but she already held appropriate clearance. Same branch, similar level, different unit. Technically, it wasn't impossible for her to enter. It just wasn't routine. I'm not asking to go through your files, she said lightly. I just thought I could help organize. Make things easier when you're back on your feet. Organize. That word feels harmless. I handed her the key to the drawer. She retrieved the token herself. I didn't walk her to the SCIF door. I trusted her enough not to. For the next hour, I lay on the couch with an ice pack on my head, while she moved in and out of the hallway. I heard the heavy door open once, close once. No alarms, no raised voices, no obvious breach. She came back with a small stack of printed draft notes. You had duplicates everywhere, she said. I shredded the outdated versions. I nodded slowly. Thanks. At the time, it sounded helpful. When I was medically cleared 10 days later, the first thing I did was return to the SCIF. The room felt the same temperature, same low hum of secure equipment. Nothing looked disturbed. I logged into my primary workstation. The main project directory opened normally, subfolders intact. Encryption modules present. Simulation files accounted for. Then I clicked into the final build archive. Empty. I froze. I checked the recycle bin within the secure environment. Nothing. I ran a search using file identifiers I had memorized. No results. My heartbeat didn't spike. It slowed. I accessed the system logs. Every authentication attempt inside a SCIF environment is recorded. Timestamped. User credential. Terminal ID. There it was. An access session 3 days into my medical leave. My credentials. Physical token validated. Biometric confirmation successful. Timestamp 21:43 hours. I was on the couch at 21:43, watching a muted documentary, because light still bothered my eyes, which meant someone had used my physical token and passed biometric verification. That wasn't possible unless my fingerprint had been registered during the login process while I was nearby, or unless she had found a way to bypass that layer entirely. I pulled the deeper system audit logs. There were file transfers. External device interaction flagged but not blocked. A removable encrypted drive had connected for exactly 4 minutes. 4 minutes is enough. I walked out of the SCIF slowly and found Victoria in the kitchen scrolling through her phone. Did you access my project files while I was on medical leave? I asked. She didn't even flinch. I cleaned up your mess, she said without looking up. Did you connect an external drive? She sighed dramatically and set the phone down. You hit your head pretty hard, Ellie. Don't call me that. I asked you a direct question. And I'm giving you a direct answer, she replied. You've been paranoid about that project for months. You probably moved something and forgot. Mild concussions affect memory. I stepped closer. There's a log entry with a removable drive. She gave a small dismissive laugh. Oh my God, I plugged in my tablet charger. Maybe the system flagged it. Relax, it wasn't a charger. You're spiraling, she said calmly. You need to let it go. I watched her face carefully. No guilt, no panic, just control. I shredded outdated drafts, she continued. You hoard versions of everything. I was helping. Did you copy anything? I asked. She leaned back against the counter and crossed her arms. Why would I steal your paperwork? You sit in a room all day. It's not exactly glamorous. There it was again, desk job, paperwork. She reduced it to something small because if it stayed small, I had no reason to fight. I returned to the SCIF and dug deeper. She hadn't just copied files. She had permanently deleted the original compiled build from my workstation. The backups I thought were safe gone. The local mirrored archive wiped. Whoever accessed that system didn't just browse. They cleaned. That takes intention. That takes planning. I stood in the center of that secure room and felt something settle into place. This wasn't about misunderstanding logs. This wasn't about concussion confusion. She didn't just take my work. She erased my proof. And she did it while bringing me soup and pretending to care. Whether the light hurt my eyes. I kept my discovery to myself and showed up to the family dinner like nothing had happened. The house looked exactly the way it always did, when something involved Victoria extra lighting polished silverware, my mother, moving like she was hosting a political fundraiser instead of a meal. A banner that said, "Congratulations." Lieutenant Colonel Vance hung across the dining room wall. Not handwritten, professionally printed. My father stood near the fireplace in a pressed button-down shirt posture straight out of his old service photos. Retired but never relaxed. He shook hands with two officers from Victoria's unit who had driven in for the evening. Laughter carried easily across the room. I walked in wearing civilian clothes. No uniform, no visible rank, just Eleanor. Victoria spotted me first. She made it, she announced to the room like I had almost skipped the event. I nodded, wouldn't miss it. That part was true. If I was going to watch my project get celebrated under her name, I might as well do it with a front row seat. Dinner started with a toast. My father lifted his glass. To Victoria. The only one in this family who understands leadership. The room chuckled lightly. He continued. She's the pride of the Vance name, strategic, decisive, and not afraid to step into the arena. Only one. I kept my expression neutral. He turned toward me briefly. Cyber work is fine, he added almost as an afterthought. But real command takes presence. Presence. I've built systems that prevented hostile breaches into operational networks. But sure, presence. We sat down. The officers beside Victoria asked her about the project. She answered smoothly, describing system layers and threat mitigation like she had lived inside the code. I watched her carefully. She never stumbled. She didn't need to. She had rehearsed. Halfway through the main course, I decided to test something. I'm curious, I said calmly, addressing her directly. How did you handle the adaptive failover trigger in the final encryption layer? She didn't hesitate. We optimized it, she replied. Made it more efficient. That's vague, I said. My mother set her fork down sharply. Eleanor, I'm just asking, I replied. Victoria smiled at the officers. She's always been detail-oriented. That's one way to put it, my father muttered. I kept my tone even. The adaptive trigger required precise threshold calibration. It wasn't something you could just optimize casually. Victoria leaned back in her chair, amused. You're still thinking small, she said. That's why you stay behind the screen. There it was again. Behind the screen, my mother cut in before I could respond. This is supposed to be a celebration, not a competition. I'm not competing, I said. You sound jealous, she replied flatly. Jealous? That word hung in the air like a verdict. I asked a technical question, I said calmly. You always do this, she continued. You undermine. You pick apart. You can't just be happy for her. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. Victoria gave a light laugh. It's okay, Mom. She's passionate. I looked directly at her. Did you review the deep layer source code yourself? My father slammed his hand lightly against the table. Not violent. Just enough to signal authority. That's enough, he said. Victoria earned this. If you couldn't handle the pressure of operational command, that's your choice. Pressure of operational command. I never applied for her command track. I chose cyber because that's where my aptitude scored highest and where national security actually needed expertise. But in this house, visibility outranked effectiveness. My mother shook her head. You sit at a desk and type. Don't pretend it's the same. Desk. Typing. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Operation Northern Phantom required months of back-end development. Victoria's smile sharpened. She always thinks she's the genius in the room, she said lightly to her friends. But when it comes to real-world pressure, she folds. That one landed. She couldn't handle field intensity, Victoria continued. That's why she hides in classified labs. The officers laughed politely, not cruelly, just socially. They didn't know the full story. They only knew the version presented tonight. I stared at her across the table. "You're saying I can't handle pressure?" I asked. She shrugged. "You prefer safe environments." Safe. I thought about the night simulations where I defended systems under live attack scenarios. I thought about the hours spent tracking hostile intrusions that, if successful, could expose real-world assets. Safe wasn't the word I would have chosen. My mother leaned toward me. "Let her have this moment. You've always been good at supporting. Stay in that role." There it was again, role, not identity, not achievement, role. I lowered my gaze briefly, not in defeat, but to make sure my hand stayed steady. Because under the table inside my pocket, I was holding a small encrypted USB drive. The only reason I hadn't panicked when I discovered the deleted files was because I don't build systems without redundancy. Before my injury, I had embedded a secondary, deeply nested module within the image encryption layer. It wasn't visible in the standard interface. It didn't show up in basic directory scans. It sat inside the metadata structure of the visualization files, dormant, silent, and it logged. Not just user interaction, system-level manipulation. Most people don't inspect image encryption code. They focus on operational modules, surface layers. Victoria had copied the primary architecture. She had wiped the obvious backups. But she had never asked me how the deep layer metadata functioned, which meant she never checked it. She assumed I was predictable. She assumed I was simple. She assumed that deleting visible files erased authorship. Across the table, she raised her glass again. To stepping into the spotlight, she said. Everyone clinked glasses. I lifted mine as well, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating. Let them believe I was jealous. Let them reduce my work to paperwork. Let them think pressure is something that only exists on a battlefield. Under the table, my grip tightened around the USB drive. And for the first time since that ceremony, I allowed myself a quiet realization. Victoria stole the house. But she never inspected the foundation. I went back to my unit on Monday and acted like nothing was wrong. No complaints, no accusations, no dramatic confrontations in hallways. If there's one thing I've learned in cyber intelligence, it's this. You don't show your hand before the system finishes logging. Victoria's promotion meant she now had broader access and a louder voice. She moved through headquarters like she had just unlocked a new level in a video game. Doors opened faster, people listened longer. She liked that. I kept my routine unchanged. Same arrival time, same secure check-in, same hours inside classified spaces that didn't care about family politics. The difference was I started watching her more carefully. Operation Northern Phantom wasn't finished. The initial architecture had passed review, but deployment required live integration with active defensive networks. That meant continuous calibration, continuous adaptation, and that required actual technical skill. 2 days after returning, I saw her step out of a briefing room with an expression I recognized immediately, controlled panic. She walked quickly down the corridor, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I know," she said quietly. "We're refining that component." Refining. That word usually means we don't understand it yet. Later that afternoon, I accessed a sanitized copy of the integration timeline through channels I was still authorized to view. The next phase required modifying the adaptive failover triggers to sync with a new intelligence feed. That trigger was my design. It wasn't intuitive. It responded dynamically to anomaly clustering patterns. If you didn't understand the logic behind it, you couldn't safely adjust it. The following morning, I passed her in the operations center. She was staring at a screen displaying simulation outputs. Her jaw tightened when she saw me. "Everything's stable?" I asked calmly. "Of course," she replied too quickly. The simulation window behind her showed 3 flagged errors. I recognized the error codes instantly. Threshold misalignment, improper rekey sequencing, and a metadata verification failure. That last one interested me. Metadata verification. She dismissed the screen and stepped closer to block my view. "We've got it handled," she said. I nodded. "I'm sure you do." I walked away before she could read anything in my face. That afternoon, I pulled out the USB drive I had been carrying since the family dinner. I didn't plug it into any official system. That would have triggered unnecessary alerts. Instead, I reviewed my own archived notes from before the injury. When I build secure architecture, I embed authorship differently than most people. I don't leave signatures in comments. I don't write my name in code. That's amateur. I build accountability into structure. Inside the image encryption layer of Northern Phantom, I embedded a secondary algorithm. It was woven into the data visualization module. Every time the system rendered strategic maps or simulation heat maps, the encryption process executed a silent verification protocol. Most users never see it. It doesn't change the image. It doesn't alter performance. But it does two things. First, it checks the integrity of the source environment. If the system detects that it's running outside its originally registered hardware parameters, it flags it. Second, it creates a geolocation stamp tied to the device's network environment and encrypts that stamp into a hidden metadata layer. Not a visible watermark, not a pop-up. A deep layered digital tag. And if someone attempts to alter or strip that metadata, without understanding the full encryption sequence, the algorithm triggers a failsafe. Not a catastrophic wipe. I'm not reckless, but a system-wide lockout that requires administrative intervention and generates a detailed forensic log. When I built it, I told myself it was standard redundancy. Now it felt like foresight. 3 days later, Victoria requested an internal technical review meeting. She didn't invite me. That was fine. I had no intention of forcing my way in. Instead, I monitored the network performance reports. At 14:07 hours, the simulation servers experienced a brief freeze. At 14:08, the visualization module failed to render. At 14:09, the system logged an unauthorized metadata modification attempt. There it was. Someone had tried to clean the image files, probably because they noticed irregular data embedded in the structure. They didn't understand it. So they tried to remove it. The failsafe didn't activate fully. Not yet. It was designed with stages. Stage 1, silent logging. Stage 2, environment tagging. Stage 3, visible response. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. She was digging, and she didn't know she was digging into something designed by the person she underestimated most. Later that evening, she found me in the hallway. "Quick question," she said, forcing casual tone. "When you structured the visualization encryption, did you layer any legacy metadata from previous projects?" "No," I said evenly. "Why, just checking," she replied. Her eyes searched my face. I kept it neutral. "Everything clean?" I asked. "Of course." She walked away before I could say anything else. She was trying to diagnose something she didn't build. That's the problem with stealing architecture. You inherit complexity you don't understand. That night, I reviewed the deeper logs again through authorized channels tied to system integrity checks. The geotag stamp had updated. The system now contained a record of the exact network environment where unauthorized modification was attempted. Device signature, timestamp, location cluster. If this escalated to formal review, I wouldn't need to argue. The system would speak. The next morning, I watched her enter the building with controlled confidence. She greeted people, shook hands, maintained posture. But when she passed a mirrored wall, I saw the flicker, uncertainty. She didn't know why the errors kept appearing. She didn't know why the visualization module resisted adjustment. She thought it was a bug. It wasn't. It was authorship refusing to be erased. At lunch, she approached me again. "Can you take a quick look at something later?" she asked. "Just a sanity check." Sanity check. That was new. "I thought you had it handled," I replied. "We do," she said quickly. "I just value your opinion. For years, I would have helped immediately. For years, I would have stepped in and fixed what she didn't understand." I looked at her carefully. "My goodwill has limits," I said calmly. "And you crossed one." She blinked confused. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied. I smiled slightly. "I know. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought you would never defend yourself, someone who mistook your patience for weakness, hit like on this video. Not for revenge, for accountability. Because kindness without boundaries isn't virtue. It's permission." I watched her confidence thin out over the next 48 hours. The official notice came down Wednesday morning. General Samuel Brooks wanted a live demonstration of the Northern Phantom defense architecture in front of senior command and external oversight. Mod slides, not summaries, a live system run. That's the difference between storytelling and ownership. Slides are theater, live systems don't lie. I saw the email traffic move fast across secured channels. Subject lines tightened. Deadlines moved forward. The demonstration was scheduled for Friday at 900. Victoria walked through headquarters like someone trying not to run in a hospital hallway. She stopped smiling at random staff. She stopped making eye contact during casual greetings. At 1300 that afternoon, I saw her in the secure lab assigned for the demonstration prep. The simulation environment was active. The visualization module was loaded. 3 analysts sat nearby, waiting for instruction. "Let's run the intrusion simulation," she said. An analyst initiated the staged breach. The system responded correctly for the first 12 seconds. Then the adaptive failover triggered an integrity check. The screen paused. A subtle delay. Nothing catastrophic. But Victoria didn't know what she was looking at. "Why is it hesitating?" she demanded. "It's recalibrating threshold clusters," one analyst replied carefully. "Why?" she snapped. The analyst glanced at the code panel. "That's how it was built." She didn't answer. Because she didn't build it. Thursday morning, the errors increased. Improper key regeneration. Metadata verification flags. The deep layer algorithm wasn't attacking the system. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do, verifying environment consistency. But since someone had attempted to alter components without understanding their interdependencies, it kept catching inconsistencies. By 1500 hours, the tension in that prep room felt heavy enough to measure. At 16:30, my phone buzzed. "Victoria, can we talk?" she asked. I agreed to meet in an empty conference room. She closed the door behind her and dropped the performance mask. "This system is unstable," she said quietly. "It wasn't last month," I replied. She ignored that. "There are glitches in the visualization encryption layer," she continued. "Random verification loops." "Not random," I said calmly. She swallowed. "Look," she began, shifting tone if I overstepped before I shouldn't have. "I'm sorry if you felt sidelined." If I felt sidelined, that was efficient phrasing. "You didn't sideline me," I said. "You erased me." Her jaw tightened. "We don't have time for this." "No, we didn't. General Brooks expects a clean demonstration," she said. "I just need you to sanity check the code." Quietly, so she could stand in front of leadership and present it as her fix. "I thought I couldn't handle operational pressure," I said evenly. She looked away. "This isn't about pride," she insisted. "It's about the mission." That word again. Mission. She used it when convenient. I studied her face carefully. The calculation was obvious. If I helped, she survived Friday. If I didn't, she risked exposure. "You're asking for technical assistance," I said. "Yes, and if I help, you'll be doing the right thing." The right thing. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Fine," I said finally. "Bring me the current build." Relief flashed across her face. We returned to the secure lab together. The analyst looked surprised to see me. Victoria gestured toward the primary terminal. "Major Vance will review the encryption layer." I logged in under my own credentials. Authorized. Transparent. I navigated directly to the visualization module. There it was. The metadata tampering attempt from earlier in the week. She had tried to manually edit the embedded structure. That's like opening a watch and pulling at gears because they look unnecessary. I made a few precise adjustments, not to fix her errors, but to finalize stage 3 of my failsafe. The deep layer algorithm had always been capable of escalating from silent logging to visible alert. I just hadn't activated the public-facing response trigger, until now. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Stabilizing the integrity loop," I replied. Technically true. I resequenced the metadata verification protocol to initiate a full-screen integrity alert if unauthorized authorship conflicts were detected during live demonstration mode. Then I saved the configuration. "You should be fine," I said calmly. She exhaled slowly. "Thank you," I stood up. "Make sure you don't modify the visualization layer again without understanding it," I added. She nodded quickly. Of course. As I left the room, I knew exactly what would happen. During Friday's live demonstration, the system would perform a comprehensive environment check. It would compare current authorship patterns against the original encrypted signature embedded months ago. It would detect the unauthorized duplication event tied to her network environment during my medical leave. And because I had just finalized stage 3, it would display that conflict visibly, not as revenge, as verification. Friday morning came fast. The lab buzzed with tension, uniforms pressed, senior officers present. General Brooks entered precisely at 0858. Victoria stood at the front, posture-controlled, voice steady. "Today, I'll be demonstrating the integrated defense architecture of Operation Northern Phantom." I took a seat along the side wall. The simulation began. Intrusion attempt detected. Initial barrier engaged. Adaptive trigger activated. Then the system performed the deep integrity scan. I watched her eyes track the screen. She didn't know what was coming, and for the first time since she stepped onto that stage weeks ago, she wasn't in control of the narrative anymore. She thought she was climbing. She didn't realize she had been digging. I stepped out of the lab before the full scan completed because I already knew what it would find. The demonstration paused under the excuse of a temporary system recalibration. General Brooks didn't look amused, but he agreed to reconvene the next morning for a final review. That bought Victoria less than 24 hours. Less than 24 hours before the system decided to speak for me. At 1700, I sent her a message. My office. Now. She arrived 10 minutes later, still in uniform, still carrying that strained version of confidence. I had already prepared the room, door closed, blinds drawn, secure environment active. And clipped neatly to the inside seam of my name tape was a miniature authorized military audio recorder, standard issue for sensitive debriefs, fully legal within my clearance scope. I pressed record before she knocked. She stepped in and shut the door behind her. "What do you want?" she asked, dropping the polite tone. I didn't gesture for her to sit. "Vicky," I said evenly. "Do you want to tell General Brooks the truth?" Her expression shifted immediately. Defensive, calculating. "I don't know what you're implying," she replied. "You know exactly what I'm implying." Silence stretched between us. "I'm giving you one chance," I continued. "You can go to him before tomorrow's review. Admit you used work that wasn't yours. Frame it as poor judgment under pressure. I'll confirm you contributed operational refinements. It'll reduce the damage." Her eyes narrowed. "You'd testify for me, I'd clarify facts," I said. She let out a short laugh, not amused, just sharp. "You think this is some kind of mercy moment?" she asked. "No," I replied. "It's damage control." She paced once across the small office, then turned back toward me. "You're overestimating your leverage." "Am I?" "The system glitched," she said. "That's all anyone saw. For now." She stepped closer. "You built redundancy," she said quietly. "I get it, you're paranoid. But there's no proof of anything intentional." I didn't interrupt. "You think some metadata anomaly is going to ruin my career?" She continued. "Please, it's not an anomaly," I said calmly. "It's an authorship conflict log, tied to your network environment during my medical leave." Her jaw tightened. "You can't prove I accessed anything illegally," she snapped. "The logs can." She stared at me for several seconds. Then something shifted. The mask dropped completely. "You really think anyone's going to side with you?" she asked quietly. "This isn't about sides. It always has been," she shot back. I watched her carefully. "Vicky," I said, voice steady, "you stole classified intellectual property. You deleted original archives. You presented it as your own. That's not a sibling rivalry. That's a federal offense." Her expression hardened. "You're dramatic," she said flatly. "No," I replied. "I'm precise." She folded her arms. "You should have stayed in your lane," she said. "You were safe there. Safe. You had a role," she continued. "Support, back-end, technical shadow. That worked. For you," I said. She didn't deny it. "Tomorrow doesn't have to be catastrophic," I said. "Walk into Brooks's office tonight. Tell him you misrepresented scope. I'll confirm collaboration. You lose credibility, not your commission." Her eyes went cold. "And if I don't," I held her gaze. "Then the system will escalate." She stepped even closer, lowering her voice. "You think I can't outmaneuver you?" "This isn't a maneuver," I replied. She smiled slowly. "You're still playing defense," she said. "I've already moved." My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't spike. I just waited. "You forget something," she continued. "As of last week, I outrank you. Rank." There it was. With my new position, she said I can request reassignment reviews, strategic restructuring, operational realignment. She was choosing her words carefully. "I could recommend you for transfer," she said calmly. "Remote border communications post. Minimal visibility, minimal influence." She let that sit. "You do that?" I asked evenly. "You're an obstacle," she replied without hesitation. "And obstacles get removed." There it was, not regret, not fear, just elimination strategy. "After tomorrow," she continued, "once the demonstration runs clean, you won't matter. You'll be a mid-level cyber officer with no spotlight and no allies. If you push this, you disappear." "Disappear," I nodded slowly. "So that's your answer?" I asked. "My answer," she said, "is that you're just a rock in the road. And after tomorrow, you won't be in this military anymore." The room went very still. I studied her face. She believed it. She believed rank insulated her. She believed visibility protected her. She believed I would fold like she always assumed I would. I wanted to give you a chance, I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. Spare me. I'm serious, I continued. I was offering you a controlled landing. You don't control anything, she replied. I reached up calmly and unclipped my name tape. Her eyes flickered in confusion. Then I placed the small recording device on the desk between us. Her face drained of color. You've been recorded this entire time, I said evenly. In a secured environment within regulation. She stared at the device. You can't, I said. And I did. Silence. Real silence this time. You threatened retaliatory reassignment, I continued. In response to a classified integrity concern. Her breathing changed slightly. That recording, I said calmly, will accompany the system logs if tomorrow escalates. Her voice dropped. You're insane. No, I replied. I'm done being quiet. She stood frozen for a moment. Then anger replaced shock. You're destroying your own family, she hissed. No, I said. You did that. She grabbed the door handle and paused. You won't win, she said without turning around. I'm not trying to win, I replied. I'm letting the system finish what it started. She left without another word. The door closed softly behind her. I picked up the recorder and secured the file. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge. It was about verification. And for the first time in our lives, she had underestimated the wrong sister. I arrived early and stood outside the briefing room long enough to hear her voice steady itself. The review had been elevated overnight. It wasn't just General Brooks anymore. 2 members of the Joint Oversight Panel were present along with senior technical advisors. When command smells instability in a classified system, they don't send interns. I adjusted my uniform one final time, every ribbon aligned, every crease sharp, no emotion on my face. Inside the room, Victoria stood at the front, confident again. She had recovered her posture. Her voice carried cleanly across the space. Operation Northern Phantom represents a scalable defense architecture designed to preempt hostile intrusion attempts before escalation thresholds are reached. She clicked to the first slide. Clean visuals, polished language, rehearsed delivery. General Brooks sat in the center, hands folded, expression neutral, but not warm. Proceed with the live simulation, he said. The lights dimmed slightly as the primary display activated. Victoria initiated the demonstration. Simulated intrusion vector entering from northern grid cluster, she narrated. Watch how the system isolates and neutralizes. The breach simulation triggered. Barrier 1 engaged. Adaptive authentication recalibrated. Heat map rendered. Everything looked smooth. I stepped quietly into the back of the room and remained standing near the wall. She saw me. Her expression didn't change, but her hand tightened slightly on the remote. The system advanced into phase 2. Here you'll see the dynamic failover protocol adjust in real time, she said confidently. The adaptive trigger engaged. That's when the deep layer integrity scan began. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the visualization module froze, not crashed, paused. A red tint slowly bled across the display. At first it looked like a rendering error. Then text appeared. Not subtle, not hidden. Full screen, property of Major Eleanor Vance. Unauthorized access detected. The room went silent. Victoria didn't move. The text continued populating. Below the primary line, a structured log unfolded in clean, white system font. Integrity conflict. Identified source. Environment. Mismatch. Original authorship registered Major Eleanor Vance. Unauthorized duplication. Event logged. Timestamp 2143 hours. Device signature. Registered to Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Vance, location tag. Residential network. Verified during medical leave period. The date on the screen matched the 3rd night of my concussion recovery. No one spoke. The simulation halted entirely. Victoria clicked the remote twice. Nothing changed. She attempted to navigate to another module. The system locked the interface. Is this part of the demonstration? One oversight member asked flatly. Victoria swallowed. It appears to be a diagnostic overlay, she said. Diagnostic overlay, General Brooks repeated. Her voice tightened slightly, likely a legacy marker embedded during early development. I stepped forward then. Permission to address the panel, sir, I said clearly. Every head turned. General Brooks studied me for one long second. Granted. I walked to the front of the room at a measured pace, stopped 3 feet from the display, turned, and delivered a precise regulation salute. He returned it. "Major Eleanor Vance," he said. "Explain this." "Yes, sir." I faced the panel. 6 months ago, I developed the original Northern Phantom architecture under compartmentalized clearance. The visualization encryption layer contains a deep metadata integrity protocol. It logs unauthorized duplication attempts and geotags source environments when conflicts occur. I gestured toward the screen. "What you are seeing is not a malfunction. It is a verification event triggered during live demonstration mode." Victoria finally spoke. "That's not accurate," she said quickly. "We collaborated." I didn't look at her. "The logs indicate that during my documented medical leave following a training injury, the system was accessed using my physical token. An external drive was connected. The original compiled build was removed from my workstation. Subsequent duplication occurred within Lieutenant Colonel Vance's network environment." The oversight member leaned forward. "Are you alleging theft of classified material?" "I am presenting forensic system output," I replied evenly. Victoria's voice sharpened. "This is a technical misunderstanding." General Brooks turned toward her. "Were you present in Major Vance's secured workspace during her medical restriction period?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes," she said. "I was assisting her. Did you transfer files? I reorganized draft materials. Did you delete original archives?" She paused too long. The red display remained bright behind us, the log entries impossible to ignore. General Brooks looked back at me. "Do you have supporting documentation beyond the system output?" "Yes, sir." I removed a secure data drive from my inner pocket, and I added an audio recording of a conversation yesterday in which Lieutenant Colonel Vance threatened retaliatory reassignment if I reported system integrity concerns. Victoria's head snapped toward me. "You recorded me," she demanded. "In a secured environment," I replied calmly. The room shifted from tension to gravity. General Brooks' expression went cold. "Lieutenant Colonel," he said slowly, "did you threaten reassignment in response to potential misconduct exposure?" "That's taken out of context," she said. "Is the statement accurate?" he pressed. Silence. That silence said more than any explanation could. The oversight members signaled to a technical advisor who stepped forward and examined the system log on the main display. "It's clean," the advisor said after a moment. "The metadata layer is deeply embedded, not easily fabricated." General Brooks stood. The entire room followed. "Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Vance," he said formally, "you are relieved of presentation authority pending immediate investigation." Her face strained. "Sir." "You will surrender your access credentials and remain available for questioning." He turned to me. "Major Vance, you will provide all supporting documentation to the investigative team." "Yes, sir." Victoria looked at me like she was trying to recalculate a war she thought she had already won. "You did this," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "The system did." 2 security officers stepped forward. Not aggressively, just professionally. She removed her access badge slowly and placed it on the table. The red screen still displayed my name, not as ego, as authorship, as verification, as proof. For years I had stood behind her in rooms like this. Invisible, support, backend. Today I stood in front of the same leadership structure in full uniform posture. Steady voice, clear, not loud, not emotional, precise. The difference between us was simple. She believed visibility was power. I built power into the foundation. And foundations, when tested, don't blink. I didn't celebrate when they escorted her out. There was no satisfaction in watching security protocol replace applause. There was paperwork, a lot of it. The investigation moved quickly. Classified intellectual property theft isn't something the military shrugs off, especially when it involves operational defense systems. The forensic logs I provided matched the system output displayed during the review. The audio recording confirmed retaliatory intent. Victoria was formally relieved of duty within 48 hours. Within a week, she was stripped of her newly pinned rank pending court-martial proceedings. Charges included unauthorized access to classified material, deletion of government property, and fraudulent misrepresentation of authorship. Her name disappeared from internal leadership memos. The banner from my parents' dining room didn't age well. I stayed focused on work. Northern Phantom was reassigned to a secure joint team. I was asked to brief the Technical Recovery Board on structural integrity safeguards moving forward. I did, calmly, without commentary about family. General Brooks called me into his office 3 days after the formal charges were announced. "You handled that professionally," he said. "I handled it within regulation, sir." He nodded once. "Your reassignment request to Strategic Cyber Integration Command has been approved." That caught my attention. I hadn't submitted that request recently. "You recommended it," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Your work belongs at a higher level. Higher level, not spotlight, not applause. Responsibility." "I won't waste it, sir," I said. "I know," he replied. When the news reached my parents, the phone started ringing. I didn't answer the first 5 calls. On the 6th, I did. My mother's voice was already shaking. "What have you done?" she demanded. "I reported misconduct," I said evenly. "She's facing a court-martial," she cried. "Do you understand what that means for her future?" "Yes," I replied. "I do. You could retract your statement," she insisted. "You could say it was a misunderstanding, a systems error." "No," I said. "She made a mistake," my mother continued. "Sisters fight. That doesn't mean you destroy each other. This isn't a fight," I said calmly. "It's a felony." There was a long pause. "You've always been jealous," she said quietly. That one almost would have hurt years ago. "I paid her debts," I replied. "I gave up opportunities. I defended her reputation. Jealousy wasn't the issue. She's your sister," my mother said. "Family protects family." "Family doesn't erase each other's work," I answered. She started crying harder. "Please," she whispered. "If she's convicted, she loses everything." I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I said the only thing left to say. "You didn't save her from her greed," I told her. "Let the law teach her honesty." Silence. Then the line went dead. My father never called. Instead, he sent a short text 2 days later. "You've embarrassed this family." I read it once and didn't respond. The court-martial process unfolded the way military justice does, structured, documented, clinical. I testified only to technical facts. No emotion, no character attacks, just logs, timestamps, and authorship verification. Victoria avoided eye contact during proceedings. For the first time in her life, charm didn't work. Rank didn't shield her. Visibility didn't protect her. The outcome was predictable given the evidence. Formal reprimand, forfeiture of rank, discharge under serious misconduct. Possible civilian charges were referred for review. Her career ended the way it began, on paperwork. My transfer orders arrived a week later. Strategic Cyber Integration Command, under Space Operations. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I was told I worked behind the scenes. Now I was being assigned to systems that monitored threats beyond the atmosphere. The night before I left, I drove past my parents' house, not to go inside, just to see it. The lights were on, curtains drawn, no celebration banners this time. I sat in the car for a minute longer than necessary. Then I reached into the passenger seat and picked up a small object. My father's old service ring. He had given it to Victoria the night she commissioned. A symbolic gesture, legacy, pride. After the court-martial announcement, he had mailed it back to me without explanation. No note, just the ring. Maybe he didn't know what to do with it. Maybe he thought I should carry it. I turned it over in my hand. For years, I had wanted his approval more than I wanted recognition. Now I realized something simple. Approval from someone who only values visibility isn't worth much. I opened the car door, walked to the trash bin at the edge of the driveway, and dropped the ring inside. Not out of spite, out of closure. I drove away without looking back. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the road. My new orders sat folded in the center console. My future wasn't dependent on anyone's applause. For most of my life, I believed strength meant absorbing impact quietly, taking hits, holding structures together so others could shine. That wasn't strength. That was permission. Real strength is building something solid and defending it when someone tries to steal it. Real loyalty isn't silence. It's integrity. I didn't lose a sister that week. I lost an illusion, and in its place, I gained something better. Authority over my own work. Authority over my own boundaries. Authority over my own future. If you were in my position, would you have withdrawn the charges to protect your family name? Or would you have let the truth stand no matter the cost? Tell me what you would have done in the comments, and if stories about integrity and resilience matter to you, subscribe to the channel. I read every single response. I used to think loyalty meant staying quiet. Not weak, not passive, just disciplined. I believed that if I worked harder, sacrificed more, and kept my head down, the right people would notice. That eventually fairness would correct itself. It doesn't. Fairness doesn't wake up one morning and reorganize your life. Systems don't self-correct unless someone forces them to. For years, I told myself I was being a good sister, a good daughter, a good officer. Every time I stepped aside so Victoria could move forward, I framed it as strength. It wasn't strength. It was self-erasure. I thought I was being loyal. What I was actually doing was training people to undervalue me. That's the part nobody teaches you. When you constantly absorb pressure so others don't have to, you don't become respected. You become expected. An expectation without boundaries turns into entitlement. Looking back, the warning signs were obvious. When I paid off her debt, it wasn't treated like a sacrifice. It was treated like responsibility. When I gave up my fellowship, it wasn't framed as generosity. It was framed as maturity. When I stayed quiet at family dinners, it wasn't seen as grace. It was seen as proof that I belonged in the background. That's how self-betrayal works. It disguises itself as virtue. You tell yourself you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is teaching people that your peace is negotiable. If you're watching this and thinking, that sounds familiar, let me be direct with you. There are 3 clear signs you're not being loyal, you're being used. First, you are always the crisis manager, but never the credit holder. You solve problems, you fix errors, you step in when things break. But when the room applauds, your name is missing. And when you mention that imbalance, you're told you're sensitive. Second, when you raise legitimate concerns, your character is questioned instead of your facts. You're jealous, you're insecure, you're overreacting. Notice the pattern. The discussion shifts from behavior to personality. That's not accountability, that's deflection. Third, your help is assumed, not requested. Nobody asks if you're available, they assume you will be. Your time isn't negotiated, it's allocated. And when you finally say no, the shock on their faces tells you everything. I used to think saying no required a speech. It doesn't. No is a complete sentence. But here's the harder truth. You can't blame people forever for taking what you consistently hand them. I built the pattern in my own life. I made myself the support beam. I volunteered for that role. I believed it made me indispensable. What it actually did was make me invisible. When Victoria stole my work, that wasn't the first boundary she crossed. It was the first one I enforced. That's the difference. Boundaries don't prevent betrayal, they expose it. And enforcing them doesn't make you cruel, it makes you clear. There's a difference between helping someone and carrying them. Helping is temporary. Caring becomes identity. In families, especially competitive ones, roles get assigned early. The golden child, the reliable one, the difficult one, the invisible one. If you were labeled the strong one, you were probably the least protected, because strong people don't need help. Strong people don't need validation. Strong people don't need recognition. That's the story. It's wrong. Strength without recognition turns into resentment. And resentment doesn't explode immediately. It builds quietly until one moment forces it into daylight. For me, that moment was a red screen with my name on it. But it didn't start there. It started years earlier when I accepted less than I deserved and called it love. Here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep them comfortable. You don't owe anyone access to your work just because they share your blood. You don't owe anyone self-sacrifice as proof of loyalty. Real loyalty flows both directions. Real respect is mutual. If your loyalty costs you your identity, it isn't loyalty, it's surrender. And surrender doesn't make you noble, it makes you predictable. When I stopped fixing Victoria's mistakes, she didn't fall because I pushed her. She fell because she had been standing on borrowed structure. That's another uncomfortable truth. If someone's success depends on your silence, it's not sustainable. Eventually, the silence breaks. Now let me give you something practical. If you're in a workplace where someone constantly takes credit for your ideas, document everything. Email summaries, time-stamped drafts, version control. Not because you're paranoid, because clarity protects you. If you're in a family dynamic where you're always the stabilizer test. What happens when you step back once? Not dramatically, just once. Notice who panics. Notice who adjusts. That reaction will tell you whether you are valued or simply useful. And if you're afraid that setting boundaries will cost you relationships, understand this. Relationships built on your silence aren't stable, they're conditional. When I enforced mine, I lost access to a version of my family, but I gained something far more valuable: self-respect that doesn't depend on applause. You can be kind and firm at the same time. You can love people and still hold them accountable. You can support someone without shrinking yourself. But you cannot continue to disappear and expect to be seen. That's the lesson I paid for. And it was expensive. If you've ever realized you were the one holding everything together while everyone else took the spotlight, ask yourself one honest question. Are you loyal, or are you slowly betraying yourself? Because once you see the difference, you won't unsee it. And once you stop surrendering, people will either adjust or they'll expose exactly who they've always been. I used to think the system failure happened in that conference room. It didn't. It started years earlier at my parents' dinner table. Gaslighting doesn't begin with dramatic lies. It begins with small rewrites of reality. A comment here, a dismissal there, a subtle shift in narrative that makes you question your own memory. And the dangerous part: it rarely feels aggressive at first. It feels like correction. When I asked a technical question at that dinner, I wasn't attacking anyone. I was asking for clarity. The response wasn't technical, it was personal. You're jealous, you're overreacting. Don't make this about you. That's gaslighting in its cleanest form. The issue shifts from facts to your character. Instead of answering the question, they question you. Gaslighting is not just lying. It's strategic doubt. It's making someone question their own perception long enough that they stop trusting it. And families are the most efficient environment for it. Because families have history, they have roles, they have narratives that were written before you were old enough to defend yourself. If you were labeled the sensitive one, every legitimate concern will be filtered through that label. If you were labeled the strong one, your pain will be minimized. If you were labeled the problem, your voice will automatically be suspect. Gaslighting works best when it attaches to an existing identity. In my case, I was the quiet one, the analytical one, the one who worked behind the scenes. So when I pointed out inconsistencies, it was easy to reframe me as insecure. Notice how that works. You present data, they present a diagnosis of your personality, and if you care about maintaining peace, you start doubting yourself. That's how intelligent people get trapped in it. Gaslighting doesn't fool you because you're naive. It fools you because you want the relationship to stay intact. You assume good intent. You tell yourself, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm being too critical. Maybe I should let this go. And each time you let it go, the narrative shifts further away from the truth. By the time I saw my own work on that screen under Victoria's name, the groundwork had already been laid. Years of subtle conditioning had prepared everyone in that room to believe her version over mine. Why? Because she was charismatic. Because she was visible. Because the family narrative said she was the star. And stars don't steal from supporting characters. That's how the script was written. Gaslighting thrives on scripts. Here's the part most people don't understand. Gaslighting isn't always conscious. Sometimes the person doing it genuinely believes their version. Victoria convinced herself we collaborated. My mother convinced herself I was jealous. My father convinced himself I lacked command presence. When people repeat a story often enough, it becomes real to them. But repetition doesn't turn fiction into fact. It just makes it louder. So how do you break out of it? You detach emotion from evidence. When I confronted Victoria about the missing files, she didn't argue technical details. She questioned my memory. You hit your head, you're confused. You're spiraling. If I had responded emotionally, I would have lost ground immediately. Instead, I checked logs, timestamps, device signatures. Facts don't panic. Facts don't defend themselves emotionally. They just sit there until someone reads them. If you suspect you're being gaslit, start documenting. Not obsessively, not dramatically, calmly. Write down conversations. Save emails. Confirm instructions in writing. And most importantly, stop arguing about your feelings. Argue about data. When someone says, you're imagining it, respond with specifics. On Tuesday at 3:14 p.m., this was said. Clarity disrupts manipulation. Gaslighting also relies on isolation. It works best when you feel alone in your perspective. That's why people often escalate when you bring in a third party. Not because they hate oversight, but because oversight introduces accountability. When I allowed the system to escalate publicly, it wasn't revenge. It was exposure. Gaslighting cannot survive transparency. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Sometimes we participate in our own gaslighting. We minimize our instincts. We rewrite our own memory to make situations less painful. I knew something was off long before the demonstration failed, but I wanted to believe my sister wouldn't cross that line. Belief delayed action. Action required clarity, and clarity required me to accept something I didn't want to see. If someone consistently invalidates your perception, that's not misunderstanding. That's strategy, whether conscious or not. The most powerful sentence you can say in those moments is simple: I remember it differently. You don't need to shout, you don't need to defend. You just refuse to surrender your memory, because once you surrender your perception, everything else becomes negotiable. Gaslighting only works when you need their validation more than you trust your own judgment. That's the pivot. The moment you trust your own record more than their narrative control shifts. It doesn't make you aggressive, it makes you grounded. You can still be calm, you can still be respectful, but you stop apologizing for seeing what's actually there. Families don't always implode loudly. Sometimes they erode slowly through narrative manipulation. The good child, the difficult child, the successful one, the jealous one. Break the script and people get uncomfortable. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stepped outside the assigned role. When I stepped outside mine, it didn't just threaten Victoria's career. It threatened a family story that had been running for decades. And stories resist change, but truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be consistent. If you're dealing with gaslighting right now at work, at home, in a relationship, start small. Trust your notes, trust your patterns, trust what repeats. You don't need to convince everyone. You only need to stop convincing yourself that you're wrong when you're not. Because once you stop doubting your own memory, the manipulation loses oxygen. And without oxygen, it fades. Not instantly, but inevitably. I didn't get a standing ovation when I transferred to my new command. No banners, no dramatic music, no emotional reconciliation scene. Just new orders, a new access badge, and a new building with more glass and fewer opinions about who I was supposed to be. On the drive to Strategic Cyber Integration Command, I realized something simple. The sunset didn't clap when I left town. It just kept moving. That's what real progress looks like. Quiet. For most of my life, I thought success meant being recognized. I didn't need trophies, but I thought acknowledgement mattered. I thought if I worked hard enough, the right people would eventually say, "We were wrong about you." They didn't. And that's fine. Because recognition and authority are not the same thing. Victoria chased recognition. She wanted visibility, praise, rank, applause. She optimized for perception. I optimized for structure. And structure doesn't trend. It holds. Here's something most people don't admit: chasing applause is addictive. Applause is immediate. It's loud. It's public. It tells you you're seen. Authority is different. Authority is quiet. It's earned through competence. It doesn't require everyone to agree with you. It just requires you to be right when it matters. When the system failed publicly, I didn't win because she lost. I won because the work was solid. If the code hadn't been defensible, none of this would have mattered. If my documentation had been sloppy, the investigation would have stalled. If I had relied on emotion instead of evidence, I would have been dismissed as bitter. The difference between noise and credibility is preparation. That applies everywhere. In business, in relationships, in personal goals. If your success depends on people clapping for you, it's fragile. If your success depends on your ability to deliver under scrutiny, it's durable. There's another hard truth. Some people will never acknowledge your growth because it threatens the version of you that made them comfortable. My parents never apologized, not for the pressure, not for the favoritism, not for the assumptions, and I stopped waiting for it. Waiting for validation from someone committed to misunderstanding you is a full-time job with no promotion. At my new command, nobody knew my family history. Nobody cared. They cared about performance metrics, threat modeling accuracy, response times, system resilience. That environment was clean, not emotionally clean, just professionally clear. Expectations were defined, standards were measurable, and that's when I realized something that changed everything. You don't need applause when you're operating at your actual level. You need alignment. If you constantly feel unseen, ask yourself whether you're in the wrong environment. Some rooms reward charisma, some rooms reward loyalty, some rooms reward silence, and some rooms reward competence. Choose accordingly. There's a practical side to this too. If you want durable success, build 3 things. First, documented skill, not vague talent, not "I'm good at this." Certifications. results, measurable outcomes. Second, independent credibility. Don't tie your reputation to one person's endorsement. Diversify your professional relationships. Let multiple people see your work. Third, exit leverage. Always know you can leave. That doesn't mean quitting impulsively. It means building yourself strong enough that staying is a choice, not a dependency. When I enforced boundaries with my sister, it cost me comfort. But it bought me leverage. And leverage changes how you stand in a room. You don't shrink, you don't over-explain, you don't negotiate your worth. You operate. There's something else people misunderstand about growth. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's not dramatic. It's a series of small decisions where you stop tolerating what used to feel normal. You stop answering late-night calls that only bring chaos. You stop volunteering to fix problems that were never yours. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. And slowly your life stabilizes. Not because conflict disappears, but because you stop absorbing unnecessary impact. The military taught me something valuable. Systems are only as strong as their weakest unchecked vulnerability. For years, my vulnerability was approval. Once I removed that dependency, everything recalibrated. I didn't need my father's pride to do my job. I didn't need my mother's validation to trust my memory. I didn't need my sister's acknowledgement to confirm my competence. That freedom is quiet, but it's powerful. And here's the final lesson. You don't win by proving people wrong. You win by outgrowing the need to prove anything to them at all. When I dropped that ring into the trash, it wasn't rebellion, it was release. I wasn't rejecting my family, I was rejecting the version of myself that required their approval to function. Success without applause is stable. It doesn't depend on narrative, it doesn't depend on image. It depends on integrity. If you're building something right now, your career, your business, your reputation, ask yourself one question. Are you building for applause, or are you building for endurance? Because applause fades fast, endurance compounds. I didn't become stronger because my sister fell. I became stronger because I stopped playing her game. And once you stop playing the wrong game, you finally get to win the right one. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between comfort and integrity, tell me in the comments what you chose. And if conversations about resilience, accountability, and real growth matter to you, subscribe. I read every response.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.